setting up the meeting in Facebook Live.
Yeah, we're live. Hello, everybody. Good morning, and we're here back again. And we have here our Director of Education, Pat Nauer. She's going to tell you all the great information we have prepared this morning. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning. I'm so happy that everybody is here and watching this morning. If you are watching live, welcome, welcome. If you are watching on a replay, please type in #replay so we know that that's how you've seen this. This morning, we have got such an amazing presentation for you. We actually have a representative here from the Small Business Administration who's actually going to be talking about the PPP loans and will you qualify for them, because this time it's completely different than it was the last time. Right, Anna? Yes. So Anna Grogan, who's from the SBA, is going to be here talking about the PPP loans and what the qualifications are this time for the PPP loans, and giving you an overview so you know if your business is going to actually qualify or not. So Anna, I'm going to pass it on to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Pat. Obviously, we apologize for a little bit for these technical difficulties. Everybody's trying to adapt here. But good morning to everybody. My name is Anna Grogan. Everybody knows me by Annie. I'm an outreach and marketing specialist for the Small Business Administration. I work in the North District office located in Jacksonville. And our office supports 43 counties in North Florida and throughout the Panhandle. So we stay pretty busy. Today, we're going to be talking about this current round of PPP, Paycheck Protection Program relaunch. What I'm going to do is, I also have a partner. I'm supposed to have a partner here, Jose Ramos from the Orlando office. He's our area manager in the Orlando market. I know that Volusia is a little closer to Orlando, and Ed always is available to help anyone. He has had a lot of experience in SBA for a long time. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop my camera so that I can start focusing on moving this PowerPoint presentation forward. Okay, let's see here. Choose. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So as you all know, the recent round of Paycheck Protection Program was signed into law by former President Donald Trump on December 27th, 2020, which was just last month. And and this particular act, we always like to start off by mentioning what is the formal name of the act, and it is the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act. And the short name, of course, is the Economic Aid Act. And I'm going to be referring to the act as such for the rest of the presentation because it's too much to say. All right, so the good news about the act is that the act has extended the Paycheck Protection Program to March 31st, 2021. So it's a very short window, and it might be extended if the current president, has his way. It might be extended, and we might see some new information coming down the pike. But for right now, this particular program, its deadline is March 31st, 2021. And today, what we're going to do is explain and go over the things that have changed from the previous act. And for those of you who might remember, the previous act under the CARES Act was the Flexibility Act. And so we're going to compare this current launch against the things that were in place with the Flexibility Act. All right, so here we go. And let's see. All right. So what we're going to cover today, starting off, is where we are with the program. Okay, so where are we with the deployment of the program? Second, we're going to cover what's new and what has remained under the first draw and the second draw program. Then we're going to move into, for those of you who have already submitted your loan forgiveness requests, we're going to talk about what new rules can apply to you if you have not submitted your loan forgiveness application. And for even those who have, there are some things that you will be able to do, and we'll talk about that. Then we're going to move into discussing some more important updates regarding the forgiveness process, because there were some changes there as well, all good changes. And then we're going to wrap it up and talk about what you should be doing now and what additional resources you can tap into for the latest information. All right, so while drafting the Economic Aid Act, Congress was very focused on trying to eliminate as many challenges as possible for small businesses, while at the same time, they were trying to increase all the avenues of access to funding for those businesses mostly hard hit, which typically are the underrepresented areas in small business, such as women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and even veteran-owned businesses. So that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to impact those, and they wanted to provide more ways to access these funds. So in order to achieve that, the SBA, in consultation with the Treasury Department, they decided to prioritize which lenders would be authorized to submit loan applications to the SBA first. And first in that particular line were community financial institutions. And then after they got an opportunity to submit their applications for their applicants, the next group of financial institutions were going to be the smaller community financial institutions, oftentimes known as community banks. So they were going to be second in line, and they would be accepting applications and then submitting it. So what is a community financial institution, better known as CFIs in the world of the SBA? These are typically non-traditional lending institutions. Usually they're nonprofits, and they really cater to these specific segments of the underserved business community. So that's really when you hear that term, that's what we're talking about. And in that group of CFIs, you have a variety of nonprofits, such as community development financial institutions. You also have another category called minority depository institutions. You also have microloan intermediaries. So if you ever wanted to see who are the CDFIs that we work with, there is a resource that I can mention to you later on where you can actually go and find the list of all these lenders that work in conjunction with the SBA. So we've been working very hard in providing information to our field offices like ours, so that then we can in turn educate our community about the program. So in the same manner as previous rounds of the PPP, the entire loan application, to include the forgiveness application process, is going to be managed by your local lender, whoever it is that you're going to. They're going to manage that process. They're going to collect all the information, and they're going to submit your loan package to the SBA. So with that said, one of the things that we want to remind the audience is that they should always be consulting with that lender, with your current banker, or with whatever lender that that you've chosen to submit your application with. People are asking, should I go back? If I've already submitted a PPP loan, should I be going back to the same lender? And yes, that would be most convenient, but that is not absolutely necessary. You could choose another lender if you wanted to, but it would be much easier on you and the bank if you went back to the same lender that you applied for your first PPP loan with. Okay. All right, so this particular slide is already a little bit outdated. The only thing that we want to show with this particular slide is that, in keeping with that thought of trying to sort of slow the train in the beginning of the open window, it shows that on January 11th, they opened up the portal, the application portal, to submit loans to our CDIFs, and then progressively, we went through. As of January 19th. All the portals, or the complete portal, was open to all financial institutions and to all applicants. And now the most important date that we sort of have to keep in mind is the fact that March 31st is the deadline. Okay. But I do want to mention that a specific change to this round of PPP from previous rounds is that once the applicant and the lender submit their loan application to the SBA will conduct a much more vigorous or front-end compliance check on the application and the borrower. And this is, to ensure two things. One, that the applicant is truly eligible, and that two, that any outstanding action from a previous PPP loan are captured and considered for current eligibility. So when the financial institution or the lender submits their package to the SBA, you're going to notice that there's a time lapse between the time when the lender submits the packet and when the SBA actually provides a loan number to the bank that you're working with, or the lender that you're working with. Okay. So what is the first draw PPP loan? And I do want to kind of take a moment, because I know that we've had so much activity with the PPP loan program that it can get confusing. So what I do want to clarify, just to make your head kind of think straight, is that we are on the third round of PPP loans, but in the third round of PPP loans, we are going to be referring to first draw PPP and second draw PPP. All right. So just to kind of make everyone sort of understand. So under the current, or under this particular round of the PPP program, or the Economic Aid Act, applicants, it's opened because there were a lot of people who did not receive a PPP loan, or who did not apply for a PPP loan in the previous round by the deadline date, which was August 9th, 2020. And this particular program is also, not only is it trying to capture all the folks who did not apply before August 9th, but now it's also allowing the second round for, again, those businesses that are most hard hit. And that's when we're going to refer to this second draw. Okay. So what are some of the most significant changes that were made as part of this particular round? For starters, the SBA expanded the list of organizations or entities that are eligible to apply. And we're going to look at that list in the next slide. The list of eligible covered expenses has also been expanded. And as you guys know, under the PPP program, only payroll expenses and then certain operational expenses like utility and mortgage, mortgage interest and rent, the category of expenses that you could submit for your forgiveness were sort of limited. Well, now we have expanded those expenses. And among the new ones that we have added to the list are a category called operations expenses. This new category of expenses allows you to claim expenses that you incurred to sort of pivot your business. So a good example would be, purchasing a Zoom business account, or maybe, because now you need to, meet with your clients face to face, or, through video conferencing because you can't do it face to face. Or maybe you're doing it because you want to allow your employees to work from home. So anything that you have had to, any expense that you've had to incur because you've had to adapt to this new environment is now going to be covered under this operations expenses category. Another category that was added was property damage. And this is due to the fact that in certain areas of the country, there were things like, civil unrest and riots. So if your business suffered any kind of property damage under those types of circumstances, you will now be able to include those in your expenses. Another expense that was added is one called supplier cost expenses. And supplier cost expenses are any charges you pay to a supplier for essential supplies to your business during the covered period. Okay, so there are a lot of businesses that, because of the loss of revenue, have decided to add additional charges, maybe for their services or their products, right? Or maybe because there's an urgent need for something. all of these types of expenses that are now being tacked on or that were part of a contract and really, are just service charges. Now those too will be able to be expensed in your forgiveness application. And then last, but certainly not least, is any kind of expense that you have incurred on personal protective equipment, either for yourself, your employees, or your clients. And of course, we've seen, just plexiglass go up everywhere, that you eat at or that you visit. All of those types of expenses, because it's part of personal protective equipment, you will now be able to submit as part of your forgiveness process. So that's a nice bigger bucket that you'll be able to work with. And as you know, under the second round of the PPP program, business owners were required to choose either an 8-week covered period or a 24-week covered period. With this current round, this round 3, borrowers have an opportunity to pick a covered period of their choice. So what does that mean? That means that you could pick an 8-week covered period. You could pick a 10-week covered period, a 12-week covered period, 15, whatever you choose, it's going to be okay as long as it's between 8 and 24 weeks. So, no longer are you going to have to worry about trying to figure out or trying to keep up with this alternative covered period that was part of the that was in effect under the Flexibility Act. So that's also good news. And then, as already mentioned, the Economic Aid Act also provides for certain borrowers who may have already taken a PPP loan request to apply for a second draw. But that has some very specific qualifications, and that pool of money is actually being provided for a much smaller group of business owners. And then, of course, again, the reminder of March 31st. Okay. All right, so in this particular slide, under the Economic Aid Act, the rules for the category of eligible businesses who could apply for the first draw loan have expanded. And in this particular slide, the group that you see at the bottom, still eligible, those are all the types of businesses that were eligible with the first and the second round of PPP loans. The top group, newly eligible, those are the additional new entities that have been added to this eligible group. So all of these types of organizations now have an opportunity to submit their very first PPP application. So among them, housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations, and interesting with this one is even, lots of counties have sort of tourism or tourism marketing organizations or departments that are sort of funded in a funky way. Well, even now, those types of divisions or departments, that are tied to maybe county operations will be able to apply for some of this PPP funding because of, again, they've been so hard hit. Oftentimes, those departments are actually funded by bed tax. And so because bed tax has been reduced so much, we're trying to keep these organizations alive so that they'll be well and kicking for when COVID is all over. And then, of course, a new group of nonprofits is 501c6s, which, oh, by the way, happen to be chambers of commerce. So now the Volusia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce can actually apply for a PPP loan, which was something you couldn't do before. And then last, as well added to the list is eligible news or newspaper organizations. And think a lot of your sort of your NPR, your local NPR organizations. And this category has been added because we know that local nonprofit news organizations are usually one of the ways that people get their information. And so we want to make sure that we keep those alive and well. So under the new under the first draw rules, the maximum number of employees a borrower can have to apply or to be eligible is 500 employees. So as you can see, this particular rule has not changed from the previous 2 rounds. Okay, so, and of course, the exception, there's always a lot of exceptions to these things. The only exception is that, you know, the SBA uses size standards for certain certain industries. So if you happen to fall in one of those industries that has an exception to the size rule, which would be 500 employees, then of course you would qualify, and the SBA would verify and check that. And just like the first and the second round, in this particular round, first loan applicants will be eligible to apply for loans that go up to $10 million. And that was the standard for round 2 and for round 1 and round 2. So that has not changed if you're applying for your first loan. All right, so then, so what is the second draw PPP loan? So let's talk a little bit about that. So the second draw PPP loan is for borrowers that previously received a PPP loan, but have 300 employees. So now we're kind of changing the rules, right? For this, for you to be eligible to apply for the second draw. In the second draw application, the most you can have for an employee count is 300 employees. And so you also must be able to show that you've had a 20% reduction, a 20% or more reduction in gross receipts between one comparable trimester or quarter in period 2019 versus the same quarter in 2020. So the second draw loans, like the loans under the, you know, for round 1 and round 2, these particular second draw loans are also guaranteed at 100% by the SBA. And just like the previous rounds of PPP, the full amount of these second draw loans are eligible for full forgiveness on the outstanding principal. All right, so that rule has not changed. So if you get a second draw a loan, you will be able to also submit for total forgiveness of that particular loan. So now, a rule that has changed for these for the second draw loan is that the maximum amount that you can get on these second draw loans is only $2 million. And like the first 2 rounds, your calculated maximum loan amount, because remember, when you submit this loan application, you have to tell the bank how much you're asking for based on this particular calculation. So when it comes to the calculation, there has been no change. And the maximum, you know, when you're figuring out what that loan, what that number is, you're going to calculate that by multiplying 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost. Okay. Now, if you are in the hotel or, you know, lodging accommodation industry, or you're in the food service industry, such as restaurants, you're going to be allowed to make that calculation or to do that calculation using a 3.5 factor against your average monthly payroll cost. So again, the SBA and the federal government is acknowledging that these 2 industries have been probably the hardest hit of all industries. And so we're allowing you to sort of compensate for that by allowing you to do a calculation that'll give you a much bigger number, okay? So under the act, borrowers may now use, so because 2019 has come and gone and 2020 has come and gone, you know, now you can actually take a look at your gross revenues from both those years. And you can either choose, when applying for this second draw loan, you can either choose to sort of compare the 2 entire years completely, you know, 12 months against 12 months to see if you're going to meet that 25% reduction or more. Or you can also decide to just look at 1 quarter. Let's say that you want to look at the second quarter earnings from 2019 and compare them to the earnings of second quarter 2020. As long as you're meeting that 25% threshold, you're going to be okay. All right. You know, so a good example would be that, let's say that in one particular quarter, you made $50,000 in gross revenue, And when you compare the same exact quarter in 2020, you only made $30,000. Well, if you do the math on that, that's a 40% reduction. So you're going to be okay. All right. So, and then because we're doing the second draw PPP loan program, the SBA had to create a brand new application form specifically to the second draw, which is why you see that those two letters SD for second draw. And the reason that we had to create this particular form is because this form is going to capture information regarding any first PPP application that you might have submitted, whether it's been already dispersed or not. So that's how we're going to capture that information. The other thing that I want to share with people is that if you're going to apply for or if you qualify to apply for a second draw PPP loan, if the amount that you are requesting in the loan is higher than $150,000, you are going to have to submit paperwork and proof that you had that 25% reduction in gross receipts at the front end of the application process. So in other words, you won't be able to submit your loan unless with it in the documentation of the loan packet, you're showing that you had that reduction. Now, if the loan request is for anything less than $150,000, that proof that you had that 25% reduction in gross revenues will have to be accompanied with your forgiveness application. I hope that that makes sense, all right? And again, a lot of these steps that we're taking now that had not been taken before is all part of us trying to reduce and avoid fraud, okay? There's always bad actors, you know, in programs like this. All right, so second draw loan eligibility. So a few additional eligibility requirements for the second draw loans, you know, have been added. And so because, as I mentioned, we're going to be conducting, you know, heightened due diligence in the front end of the loan process, you might want to submit your, you know, if you're going to be applying for, you know, an increase in that first loan, or if you're going to be applying for the second draw PPP loan, you might want to do it prior to the March 31st deadline. Although, you know, and I want to make sure because this is also very confusing, although one of the stipulations for you to get the second draw PPP loan is that you must have spent all of the proceeds of the first loan, or by the time that you get the proceeds to this second draw loan, you will have gone through all the proceeds of the first loan. That does not preclude you from applying, okay? Because we do know that this is going to be, you know, that these, the review process for these loan packets is going to take a little longer. And we have this looming, you know, March 31st deadline. So, you know, what'll happen is you'll submit your application and the SBA and the bank are working in conjunction, right? So the SBA knows what you have pending and the bank knows what you have pending. So what'll happen is you can submit this second draw loan application, and, you know, when you notify the bank that you have used or exhausted all of your, you know, first loan proceeds, then if you qualified and you were approved for the second draw, then at that point in time, the proceeds for that second draw will be dispersed. Okay, so again, because we know everyone is kind of in this catch-22. Well, the deadline's March 31st, but I haven't gone through all of my proceeds from the first loan. It's okay. Submit if you think that you're going to run out of money and you don't see any end to this pandemic, go ahead and submit the second draw, you know, your increase or your second draw request. Okay. So, and in this particular second draw, as I said, only 300 employees, and you're going to have to be able to demonstrate this particular revenue reduction. All right. Moving on. So let's talk a little bit about the loan forgiveness process. So like the previous rounds, in order to have your second draw loans forgiven, you must apply for that forgiveness through the same lender used to apply for the original loan, right? For this cycle of loans. And lenders will typically be, lenders, we have this whole separate sort of communication process with lenders, and lenders are constantly getting every single update that we provide under these programs before the general population gets it. So this is why we continue to harp on the fact that as you're submitting your loan application, as you're submitting your forgiveness application, your best buddy or your best partner is going to be that loan officer at the bank, because they're up to date with everything. They have all the loans that you need, and they know exactly what they're going to need from you in order to submit the packet so that it can be approved. So when completing your forgiveness application for the second draw loan, you will need to keep in mind some of the newest forgiveness criteria, such as the fact that the EIDL advances. Do you guys remember that under the Flexibility Act, one of the largest complaints that we had was that if you received an advance with the EIDL loan, right, which was the disaster loan, that those advances were being deducted from the forgiveness amount. Well, no longer. That rule has completely been eliminated. So let's say that you had gotten a $10,000 advance. That has now become a complete grant. You do not have to pay that back if you were not approved for a full forgiveness. That will now be eliminated. The SBA is going to be returning that money to the banks on your behalf. So it's good. And then, of course, another perk is that the proceeds from the PPP loan that you received will not be considered taxable income. And the expenses that were paid with the proceeds from your PPP loan will now be tax deductible. That is huge, okay? That was a major concern with small businesses, because they were throwing their hands up and saying, so how is this helping me, right? If the loan proceeds are considered as taxable income, and then I won't be able to deduct these expenses, so people were in an uproar, and we have addressed that with this particular round. And so now income from the loan, not tax deduct, is not considered as taxable income, and you will not, have to pay taxes on that. And then if your first draw PPP loan has not yet been approved for forgiveness, right? You have the packet in with the bank, but you haven't heard how much or when, or whether or not you've been approved for forgiveness. One of the cool things about this particular round is that you'll be able, knowing now that you have a larger bucket of expenses that you can add to that forgiveness calculation, you will be able to go back to the bank and say, hey, I now qualify for some additional expenses that should be considered as part of my original forgiveness loan application. All right. So you'll be able to go back to the bank and now add, in retrospect, these additional expenses. And that will all be taken into consideration as the SBA is working your particular forgiveness loan packet. Okay. And then another concern that, of course, was spoken about during round 1 and 2 was that, everyone was asking for a simpler, forgiveness application document. And so voila, the SBA has come up with a new form called SBA Form 3508EZ. And that's the loan that you're going to be using for any PPP loan that you might have received in an amount of $150,000 or less. Okay. So SBA Form 3508EZ. And all of these loans, all of these applications and all of these documents, to include the instructions for the applications, are all found on the SBA PPP website. Okay. So, and then, so what to do now and additional resources. So contact your lender. If you had already applied and received a PPP loan from the previous rounds, go back to that same lender if you're looking to, request a higher amount, or if you're going to be applying for this second draw. If you don't have a lender, then our database Lender Match, which I happened to mention earlier in the presentation, Lender Match is a database where you go on the SBA website, where you go and you basically fill out a profile form. And what that database does is it'll take that information that you filled out on the form, and it will send it out to lenders that are part of our network and that are SBA providers, SBA loan providers, and it will send you back a match. And so, within a 24 to 48 hour time period, the purpose of this particular tool is that lenders will then pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, Jane Doe, we received your profile. We took a look at the information you submitted with your profile form, and we just wanted to talk to you to see and get more details, about your interest in a loan, to see if we can help you. So that's the way Lender Match is supposed to work. And again, it is working for the PPP loan program. So it doesn't matter whether you're looking for just a traditional SBA loan or one of these PPP loans, you should be able to use Lender Match. And again, the infamous, website or web link is sba.gov/PPP. Everything is being updated. As soon as we get information concerning changes or updates on the PPP program, everything is being posted there. You're going to find a lot of great frequently asked questions, documents, and every time we post something on that site, you're going to see the effective date of that information, so you can always feel confident that you are looking at the most recent information. And then, of course, you can always call the SBA district office, which again, for Volusia, you're serviced out of our office in North Florida. And there you also have my email address. If you have any questions that you are interested in asking, or that maybe I did not make clear in this presentation, you can always shoot me an email. And of course, that is our phone number. And if you ask for me, the call will be directed to me. So another great way to stay on top of every change that comes about, on any given day, is to basically sign up for our newsletters. Everything that is important to the public and to small businesses is normally, part of our weekly newsletters. So that might be a great way for you to sort of stay on top of that. Okay. And I'll open it up to any questions. I did want to say that there have been a lot of questions about the EIDL program, right? And as you guys know, the EIDL program is a disaster loan program. So with the Economic Aid Act, the EIDL loan deadline has been moved to December 31st, 2021. So we now have 12 additional months where people can continue to apply for the EIDL disaster loan. And with that, and with the Economic Aid Act, we have added another EIDL program to the CARES Act, which is called the Targeted EIDL Advance. And the criteria, for the targeted EIDL, it's very interesting. And it's actually a loan program that you cannot apply to, but rather you will be targeted for. Okay. I hope that makes sense. For the targeted EIDL Advance program, you're not going to be able to apply to it. You will be selected by the SBA to participate in the program. And so what are the qualifications, or who is going to be eligible, or who is the SBA going to go knocking on doors for? And that is for it's going to be for businesses that have 300 employees or less. It's going to be for businesses that are federally identified, federally identified as as being in low-income communities, and that can demonstrate with those first two criteria that they experienced a 30% reduction in revenue, between the periods of March 2nd, 2020 or later. So who determines who is in a, federally identified low-income community? The SBA will be the one to make that determination. And that's because, we already have that information. For example, we have HubZone maps and things like that. So the SBA actually already knows where you have economically deprived communities. So again, if your business is located in one of those areas, if you have 300 employees or less, then and that you can demonstrate a 30% reduction in revenue, the SBA is going to come knocking on your door, and you're going to get notified via email. All right. And we don't know whether, after all of these organizations that are eligible for it, if there are any, proceeds left. There's been no indication that, that the program will be open to other people. Because again, this is being considered and being called and classified as a targeted EIDL loan, meaning that, that you're going to be selected out of a pool of businesses. You can't really apply for it. All right. So does anyone have any questions? I'd like to open it up for any kind of questions that you all might have.
And if anybody is watching this on the Facebook page, please type your questions in the chat box and I'll be able to pass them on to Annie.
It's a lot of information, I know.
Is there anybody on the Zoom call that has a
It's
question?
confusing.
Sorry. Is there anybody on the Zoom call that has a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, yes, my name is Jamie Perez. I'm a chiropractor. I actually received the first loan disbursement. And I would like to know if it's better to actually request an increase on that or do a new loan.
Well, you will be eligible if you feel that with the addition or the expansion of the expenses, like if you're a chiropractor, I'm assuming, and you submitted your loan the first time, I'm assuming that maybe some of that plexiglass that you put, in your front lobby where your receptionist receives your patients and things like that, if you weren't allowed to use that as part of the calculation for forgiveness, then you want to go back to your bank and let the bank know that you now qualify for these new expanded expenses that could actually help your forgiveness calculation. You want to go ahead and do that.
Okay.
You want to go ahead and do that because you're eligible to do that with this new program. And what will happen is that the bank will collect the additional evidence, right, or documentation that has to be submitted with your loan, and they will do that work for you. They have a portal that connects them directly to the SBA. So I would recommend that you go back and that you basically ask for an increase on that current, loan that you have.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yes.
Does anyone else have a question? Well,
So I just wanted to, go ahead.
no, go ahead. There are no questions on the Facebook page.
Okay, so we are putting this information in our Facebook page and also on our private Facebook page for our members only. And if you have any questions, you might be looking into doing your paperwork, your application within the next, few days. If you have any questions, you could probably post it on under the video, and we will be able to pass it along to Anna, and she will be able to answer any details as well.
Awesome.
Mhm. Anybody else that has any questions?
Yes, I have another question.
Sure.
So about the exhaustion of your previous loan, how you actually can figure that out if you had income coming in also.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the first part of your question.
For the exhaustion of the previous loan, how would you determine that you exhausted that loan completely?
Well,
If you have,
we basically, that'll be determined when you apply for forgiveness. You're going to have to show what all of your expenses were.
Mhm.
Have you already submitted for your forgiveness, for the
No, that was
forgiveness?
my next question. Where do I
Okay.
find that application?
Okay, that application that application, you can actually find it on our website. But one thing that I do want to let everyone know is that the SBA also permits or authorizes banks to use their own application. The
Okay.
applications that you find on our website basically give you the minimal information that the SBA, the minimal or the required information that the SBA needs for them to do their part, right, on the application. Banks do have the ability to take the information that we have on our loan documentations, on our applications documentations, and replicate them and maybe add some additional information, put their logo on the application. So that's one of the reasons why we say to you to, work with your bank. The applications that we have on our website are basically, for a fact that all of that information will be required and will be included in a bank's application.
Mhm.
But again, certain banks have certain rules, and they might say, well, we know that the SBA has the application online, but we want you to use our application, which includes all that information plus more. Okay.
Okay.
So you'll definitely, so again, and one of the things that you're going to notice on all of these applications is the certification section of these applications. And we do need to stress that when you're filling out these SBA loan applications, there is a slew of certifications where you're putting your initials to say yes or no, depending on what the question is, and that we are counting on you to be honest and reliable with your information so that later on that doesn't come back to haunt you. So when we say that you need to have gone through all the proceeds from the first loan before you can use the proceeds from a second loan, that's basically what we're expecting, and we're going to hold you to that. And if we find out something different, then you're putting yourself at risk to possibly being audited or having the SBA kind of knock
Mhm.
on your door for some additional questions. So because remember, those calculations are being, when you filled out your application, you had to basically indicate and tell us, well, how much is payroll, how much do you spend in payroll? And that's why we gave you the additional factor, so
Mhm.
that as part of that. And in this particular forgiveness process, the same rule applies. You must show that you have used 60% of the proceeds from the loan towards payroll, and that 40% or less of the proceeds from the loan were used for other expenses. Okay, so that's basically the rule. let's say that you used all the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds on payroll expenses, then you would be fine. But if you find yourself that you had to use the proceeds for some payroll and some expenses, then as long as you have not exceeded the use of the proceeds above 40% for other expenses, you should be fine. You should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions?
Question, good morning. What if it was newly established businesses that were created in the early part of 2020? Would they have, and you can't prove if they don't have the history from the previous years?
That's a great question. That is a great question. And we have taken that into consideration. So when was your business started?
Well, I believe it started around February of 2020, right before the whole shutdown of March.
February of 2020. So that's actually February 15th is the cutoff. You had to have been in business by February 15th to be eligible to apply. And what we've done is, because February was still in the first quarter of 2020, the rules basically say that if you can show that you had a loss in revenue in any of the 3 quarters, that is 20, that's 25% or more, you're going to be eligible to do that. We have, and you're going to be able, and you're going to basically be able to compare that first quarter with any of the other additional quarters. Because if you remember, in February, things were still kind of normal, right? Things were, that was only when we were first starting to talk about, oh my God, this coronavirus is coming down the pike, but nothing, nothing really. It wasn't until March, late March, that things really started to get all of a sudden, crazy, and businesses started to plummet. So as long as you were in business on February 15th, you will be able to compare your earnings from the first quarter against the other quarters in 2020. And you also, let's say that you don't submit your application until maybe April of this year, that's still going to give you a full 12 months to be able to show that you've had a reduction from previous quarters to a comparable quarter in the following year. So you should be good. And all of that is actually laid out for you in the application. So you'll actually be able to read that, and they're going to give you some very specific examples. If your business started in February, here are the quarters that you can compare. So you should be okay. You should be okay.
Does anyone else have another question?
Yes, I do. So you're saying the application could be done with your actual paperwork or at the bank? Does the application has that information? Like if you go into a bank to get the application done, is it exactly the same way, or should people use the SBA application instead if they want to get more detailing?
If I were you, what I would do is I would pull the application from the SBA website so that I know beforehand everything that I'm going to be asked on the application. So it's kind of like a pre-work, right? So you're going to download the SBA application and you're going to basically fill it out. And by looking at our application, you're going to know all the things that are at least the minimum documentation and information that you're going to need to have when you go to the bank. And then, at least you'll be, 3/4 ready if by any chance the bank is asking you for any additional information or any other documentation. It should help you be much, much more prepared, to submit your application if you're already, looking at the applications that we have online. It's a good preparation, for the
Okay.
conversation and the stuff that the bank's going to be asking you to do and need.
Thank you.
Does anyone
I
else have a
think-
question?
Anybody else? Any questions? In Facebook, If you're joining us on Facebook, if you have any questions.
Well, it looks like we're wrapping it up then.
All right, I'm gonna take a picture. Hang on. And I just wanted to point out that Ed Ramos is on the call with us too. Ed, you want to say hello?
Is it okay if I stop the share?
Yes,
Oh,
you
actually,
can put,
I can't stop the share. You'll need to stop it.
I have to stop?
No, Anna.
Yep, I'm good. So I have to stop the share?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
Okay,
there we go.
there we go.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Thank
Ed
you.
Ramos is our senior area manager in Orlando. Ed, share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm from Puerto Rico, and I've been in Orlando since 2003. And I used to visit Volusia County around the beginning of 2000s when there was a fellow, can't remember his name. I remember his first name was Julio, who worked for Volusia County Transportation. And I think he was the president. And I was invited to a couple of events, but my counties run from Orange County west towards Lake Sumter, Citrus, Hernando, and so I don't run north, although I should because we're neighbors. You know, I like to go over to Lelos to eat for some barbecue food. So. But nice meeting you. If you need me, Anna has my my information. And there's another presentation that maybe you have membership that is impacted or could take advantage of it. It's called the Shutter Venues. We have museums, arts promoters, theaters, and it's right now the information that we have is limited. It's a short presentation, so if you're interested, let Anna know, and then we can coordinate to present that also through Facebook. I'm watching Facebook on my other machine. I have 3 machines open at the same time, so so it's hard to keep up with this. So
Yeah.
But thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I wanted to introduce you guys to Ed because, you know, on our team, Ed, myself, and another partner, another coworker are bilingual. So whenever we're trying to do outreach for the Latino community, Ed and I partner a lot because our third bilingual team member has a very, very specific job on the team. And so she has to cater to her specific clients. And actually what she specializes in is in government contracting, which Ed will, you know, support is a topic that we really do want to try to push with some of our Hispanic communities because it's an option that a lot of times people shy away from, not really understanding or knowing, one, that there is a ton of assistance to get you to where you need to go with government contracting. And that if you're successful in government contracting, it can be extremely lucrative. So we are trying to help, and there is a tremendous push in us doing outreach to our minority communities, all women, you know, veterans, communities of color right now. And, you know, government contracting is a big part of it. Right now, we're just constantly being distracted by PPP and COVID-19, but we want to plant that seed that, that Ed and I and Carmen would be more than happy to do some additional, work and seminars with your members, about these other very important topics, and just in general, an orientation about everything that the SBA can offer and how we work with our partner organizations. So we're very happy that you guys invited us. I hope that the information has been useful. I sent the PowerPoint to the team, so you have it in English and in Spanish, and we will be presenting this information in Spanish at 2:00 today.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I
Great.
will be
Thank you.
sending I will be sending you, Anna, the link
Okay.
for the Spanish presentation.
Okay,
And we'll see you at 2 p.m. for the Spanish portion. So, no se pierdan la información en español de todo este presentación que se hizo a las 11. En español se va a hacer a las 2 de la tarde y voy a colocar el link donde se pueden comunicar con nosotros si quieren estar en la presentación de Zoom. Y también vamos a hacer el live en el Facebook. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so
Thank you
much,
all.
Ed, for being here
Thank
this
you all so
morning.
much.
And thank you
Thank
for all the
you.
members joining us.
Mhm.
And we'll see you at 2.
Great
All right,
presentation.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
you're
Thank you,
welcome. Take
bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Get us stop the Facebook Live first and then close.
Thank you. Yes. Stop Facebook Live.